Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the quarantine sessions. We are live from our home, working in quarantine from home, from Rome. And today we are with the fabulous Meg Pagani, Margherita Pagani, who's joining us from Lisbon. Hi, Meg.
Hi, dear. How
Thank
are
you.
you?
How are you? Thank you so much for joining. We're very excited to hear from you.
I'm very excited to be here and to actually listen to the comments or questions that the audience is going to have. It's amazing to connect with you. I don't know if the audience knows about this, but you're Argentinian, and I lived in Argentina for a very long time, and now you're in Italy. That is my homeland, and I'm somewhere else. So it's
Yeah.
nice to be.
Yeah, it's crazy how we connected and everything. So for the audience, for everyone to know, Meg is a social impact expert practitioner. She's an addict, basically, of social impact. She runs a company called Impacton, which was founded in Argentina, right?
I mean, it was founded after my experience with the refugee crisis in Greece and in Italy, and I moved back to Latin America and Argentina. And yes, the let's say the origin of the idea started there when I was living there. Yes.
Right. So I'm going to explain it, but probably you can explain it much better. In my words, basically, what Margherita does is she works with different organizations that are either nonprofit or social businesses and takes their model, their blueprint, so that it can be replicated anywhere around the world. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let us know what you're
You
working on
pitch
lately.
much better than me. Like you should go and pitch my company instead of me. Definitely.
Great then, great. So, how is the quarantine in Lisbon? How are you spending it these days?
I mean, I'm gonna show you a little bit of that because I have to say that I might be on the lucky side of things. Let me show you what I see from Lisbon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Like we are lucky
Wow.
because it's a
Yeah.
city where
Yeah.
many parts of the city actually are close to water. Of course,
Hmm.
it's not the sea.
Hmm.
It's a sort of connection between river and a sea. The
Yeah.
quarantine really, it's funny because I'm Italian, so for me I was living a little bit in the future when really coronavirus hit Italy, and here in Portugal I remember it was just tourism as usual and life as usual. So it was very dystopic for me for the first weeks. I would say that the quarantine here officially started since no more than 2 weeks. Actually it's not that restrictive as it is in Italy right now.
Hmm.
So for me, the quarantine is a little bit, running on different
Hmm.
timelines because, my family has been in quarantine and my friends in Italy, you included, for quite some time now. Here, it's still pretty, okay, the situation, not that hard. And of course, lots of time at home, lots of time for deciding what to do with this pit stop, if you want, for our organizations and for the various hats that that I wear.
Yeah.
It's been definitely an experience between deciding how much do I want to be exposed to the news of coronavirus, at the same time knowing that my organization can do a lot and is doing a lot for coronavirus. So what is that balance that allows me to serve for the causes that I care about without breaking in the process?
Right. Because I imagine you must have been in touch with so many people in the impact space in these days, right?
Yeah, I mean, for several reasons, really. At the beginning, it was because with Impacton, as you perfectly said, we basically help organizations that have cracked the code of a model. So they have found an
Hmm.
effective and proven solution or project for one or more social challenges, environmental as well. And we help them make that model grow beyond the limits of their organization, really. And of course, when coronavirus hits the world, the first thing that we naturally think about is how can we, share needs, shared solutions. But then, of course, a lot of people realize that sharing solution is not that straightforward to communicate a
Hmm.
project for its value or communicate a project to be done. It's two very,
Hmm.
very different, structure of information, ways to communicate, tone, importance of visuals, and so forth. So
Yes.
what happened is that we were on one side engaged by a set of organizations from Italy that actually
Hmm.
before everybody else had solutions, practices, solidarity practices from privates, from publics, from social entrepreneurs, etc., from businesses. And then on the other side, we had these communities here that said, okay, how can we use it? And how can we done or how can we do this, especially knowing that, more than half of my team is Italian. So we had
Right.
this
Right.
work of understanding what was going on there, what is going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a little bit overwhelming because you have to keep the tabs on all these different solutions, all these different initiatives, understand what is really valuable and what it isn't,
Yeah.
and navigating that, also extracting the information that can be used for others. So that is one, and the other one is the virtual events. We have done some interviews like this one, a school forum event a few days ago, etc.
Amazing, amazing. So I wanna start the interview. We're gonna talk more about coronavirus later, but I want to start the interview with a question that was sent by one of our community members. Basically, they wanted to know, how can social businesses rely on funding that are not grants, right? Because the model is still very, very, age dependent. So how can they build models and business models that don't depend on grants?
You actually have mentioned this question to me in preparation of this conversation, and I'm very very glad to whoever asked this question, because it allows me to say something that sometimes is a little bit unpopular in the impact sector, but I believe very much, which is
Mm-hmm.
especially now in coronavirus, but in general, we are moving our economy in a direction that is very much integrative. Like we
Mm-hmm.
keep having naturally for the past decades or centuries this sort of polarization between performance of business and purpose or sustainability. It's normal that it's like that because business was always historically about profit, which, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to maximize profit, at some point you need to cut to the cost at the very minimum. And that's how very recently, because, in our very agitated lives, 3 years or 5 years is a lot of time. But in
Yeah.
terms of, from the gaze of the universe, I used to call it, it's not that much time that we actually realize that if we then go for child labor, or if we then go for materials that are actually bad for our skin, that is not a business that it's good.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, we come historically from charities and if you
Yeah.
want, the non-profit model. So this polarization is natural from even the cognitive perspective, but
Yeah.
it's very much, like two planets that go very much close to each other, up to the point that is going to, in some points, is already merging or already blending. And why am I saying this? Because a lot of the social entrepreneurs or impact driven entrepreneurs that we know are definitely coming from a perspective of wanting to do good. And
Mm-hmm.
wanting to do good is definitely something we should have more at heart as a society as a whole, which is why this is a massive trend. But at the same time, sometimes those same entrepreneurs don't necessarily have the tools that come more from economy of business, like this sort of more dry way to, and not because businessmen or startups as usual are not purpose driven, but because normally they value very different things or prioritize
Yeah.
different things. So for me, the social good sector historically from the last decade or so definitely needed to rely on grants, because in even proposing a business model in the social good sector sometimes is still not even well seen.
Yeah.
And at the same time, it's not very clear. Like micro businesses is not necessarily a social business. It's just a
Yeah.
business that is small for
Yeah.
rural areas or for the global
Yeah.
south. So it's like this whole dictionary, we actually are understanding it is a little bit more complicated, or we made it
Yeah.
more complex than it should be.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
I talk about this, I always say, let's remember that these planets are colliding, and not
Mm-hmm.
to explode and nullify everything, but actually to integrate these two aspects. So grants and foundations, and if you want more of the less performance oriented finance, of course, is important to get started with our ideas. But my suggestion, and it's something that I can say by experience, is focus from the very first day on value opportunities, which is very different than revenue opportunities. Because revenue opportunities focus on what is sellable and how it is
Mm-hmm.
sellable to someone,
Mm-hmm.
one or more stakeholders or actors within your own formula, within your own ecosystem. But what I've seen it by my experience is that even if at the beginning you have grants, which is fine,
Mm-hmm.
but you focus from day one on value creation, and you
Mm-hmm.
somehow are able to detach a little bit or to zoom out a little bit from the revenue creation, you actually can figure out that many of the social businesses, their value is not necessarily economical, like selling a product or selling a service, which is definitely valid, but sometimes they create a saving. There is
Right.
models that are amazing, that we're helping replicating across the world, that don't have a revenue model and will never have a revenue model if they want to base their sustainability on that. They will Instead, maybe look at actors and look at the things that they save in terms of cost for the public sector or for the cost of people. And normally that is not a straightforward revenue model that you can identify if you focus just on revenue opportunities. So my main suggestion is definitely look at it as value creation, because if you understand very well what is your unique superpower or unique perspective, unique skills and capacity to do something, then the right actor that wants to support it or how you're saving money for someone else will automatically emerge. That
Right.
is definitely the number one thing that I would say to take and keep in mind.
Right, amazing. They were particularly also requesting for examples. So, do you know so many organizations, social businesses, and do you know three examples of companies or startups or organizations that have successful business models or models simply?
Yes, I was thinking about it a lot, and I would say that there is three, and I mean there is three, there is many, and I think that my favorite three for this conversation actually are very aligned also with what your community normally gathers for. One, for example, is from Chile, actually from pretty close to your home land,
Mhm.
and it's called Karun with
Yeah.
K. And I thought about this because Karun is one of those businesses that from day one understood that they wanted to use plastic from the ocean, from fishermen, but with a business model, or better said, with again with value creation. They said, okay, fishermen have their nets that get broken. It's pretty
Mhm.
expensive to fix them, and it doesn't have. I mean, you can fix it up to a certain point. That plastic can be used to produce sunglasses. So we can actually buy these broken nets instead of just having them because it's waste. So waste that theoretically should be for free, which is as well something that I don't necessarily agree with. So they buy the nets from the fishermen. So the fishermen have their own economic empowerment to buy new tools or invest in whatever they need for their business. And they take this plastic from the ocean. In Chile, as you know, and in Latin America in general, there is this very strong connection with nature. And in this particular case, they even decided to move their offices in Patagonia to be closer to the nature that they wanted to save with his business,
Right.
or help
Right.
protect with his business. And they focus on product exactly as every other glassmaking company. It's about design,
Mhm.
it's about branding, it's
Mhm.
about telling our story, it's about showing that it has performance. That people, for example, at some point today, their sunglasses were even used by the Chilean team in Volvo race. So actually in
Mhm.
sailing performance and sailing racing, but it's similar to the Rolex, which of course speaks of sunglasses that you buy for their performance, not
Right.
just because
Right.
they're from recycled plastic. So
Right.
this is, I think, a very effective one because it's a consumer product. It's B2C. Since the very first day, they've decided to do a model that would be rooted in their own culture as well. Karun actually
Mhm.
comes from the ancestral language of
Yeah.
Chile and of the different communities, local communities of Chile. But at the same time, since the very first day, operate as a business. And of course, probably, I imagine they had investment, they had maybe grants. But if you have entered that mindset, say, how can this be an healthy economic development model, then things start to arise. The second one that I have in mind is actually, again, I'm going to be a little bit unpopular here, but I'm using this example because I think a lot of social entrepreneurs do not consider this option enough.
Mhm.
Many of
Mhm.
us would not consider dating apps like Bumble a social business. And I do agree with you. It's not necessarily a social business, it's a digital app. But again,
Yeah.
back to what we said before, it is integrating. These two worlds are integrating. So Bumble, since the very first day, they said we want to fight, you know, sexual harassment. We want to fight misogynist culture. We want to fight these sort of behaviors that happen when dating happens online.
Right.
The
Right.
whole story of Bumble starts with a sexual harassment sue that is done on who today is, the CEO of
The
Bumble. She
CEO. Yeah.
from Tinder, from marketing in Tinder. She knew what she was talking about, and
Exactly.
I'm sure it was pretty hard that part of her life, but she came out of this with an idea, and it was not something overnight. So
Right.
why am I talking about this model?
One thing
Because
I want to add for, sorry, just to clarify for our audience that perhaps is in the Middle East and they're not so familiar, Bumble is an app, it's a dating app like Tinder, but where women make the first move. Women have a say rather than, waiting for, as usually it happens in the dating world, or it has been happening for the last centuries, where men are expected to make the first move, right?
Yeah, so it's misogynist, as you perfectly are saying, both ways. So men
Yeah.
feeling that they need to be the one to be to do the first
Yeah.
move, and women
Yeah.
either suffering that because they don't necessarily want too much of that outreach, and at the same time somehow our own way as women sometimes to be machistas or misogynists, which is like, well, the
Yeah.
man should be doing the first move. No,
Yeah.
psychologically, Bumble since day one wanted to change this,
Mm-hmm.
and mindset and these sort of social norms is, for in my opinion, part of the things that we want to change in society, and it has a very strong social component, a very strong gender equality component
Right.
in terms of the narratives, right? Something that we have
Right.
been doing forever. It's dating.
Yeah.
So if we change that, dynamic, maybe the ripple effect is going to be massive. And why am I talking about this?
Yeah.
Because it's a dating app, it has a premium feature, so it's pretty typical in terms of business model in the digital world. But something that most user even of Bumble don't know is that she started by pitching this idea to a very big existing company CEO or a main person.
Mm-hmm.
So actually,
Mm-hmm.
she does not own most of the equity of the company because of Bumble, because she was offered to do this with a very big investment, building upon the data and infrastructure IT of Badu, I think it was. So why am I saying this? Sometimes we think we need to do something from scratch for this sort of Silicon Valley way of doing things, where we need to start and we need to go fast and we need to create traction very fast. That
Yeah.
might be the case for business as usual when you
Mm-hmm.
are with people, especially when you're working with delicate aspects like gender violence, PTSD disorders, anything that is about vulnerable communities, access to healthcare, everything. You really cannot go that fast. You will break things in the
Yeah.
process. So
Yeah.
I'm speaking of this case because the way she built with what she built was maybe not something that our heropreneurship narrative would say it's the best because
Mm-hmm.
everything should be maintained or whatever, but it's an incredibly effective way to build on
Mm-hmm.
something that works, to build on an infrastructure that you will
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, if you want to grow that much, will have to build on your own. And I think that I find this story very fascinating because sometimes we think we need to do a startup to do social entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily
Yeah.
the case. And then the third one that I absolutely love, it's actually founded by a bunch of Italians, and which I actually use. I think you know them, and
Uh-huh.
it's Bloom Project from
Yeah. Lorenzo.
exactly.
Yeah.
I'm and I would love to talk about them because the model that they have done is not only thought about as a social business from day one, but actually
Mm-hmm.
as a social business that grows like spider plants, like when they
Mm-hmm.
grow and then at some point they multiply themselves in land or in the pottery. Bloom, what it does is that it enables a local community to create a low cost hydroponics system, so these sort of tubes, etc., where water drowns. With about 1/10 of water, they are able to enable this community to grow up to 17, yeah, 17, 16, 17 different vegetables and fruits
Right. Right.
autonomously with 1/10 of the water, especially designed for being implemented in locations that are affected by drought, which we
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
to be one of the causes of actually migration. People that
Yeah.
migrate because of drought, they cannot
Yeah.
have growing their own food or have access to food, so they're forced to move.
Right.
This is something that has been ideated between Italy and I think the first pilot was Senegal with a couple of research centers, if I don't remember completely wrongly. And why am I talking about this? Because it's not only thought to be a social enterprise from day one per se, so you could implement this once and being able to produce for a market, but it's been ideated in a way that it can be multiplied fairly quickly,
Yeah.
and it's been ideated in a way that two things. Once the hydroponic structure actually adjustable so that they can also employ, for example, women or people with disabilities that normally
Mm-hmm.
have a very, very hard access to employment, especially in the global south. And on the other side is also designed to have private access to food, but to somehow dose it so that you can, in within a few months, already hit the local market with these fruits and vegetables.
Right.
So it's a brilliant social business per se. Direct impact, thought for preventing people from being forced to leave their homes for a basic needs, which is food, providing healthy food, which is another level, but also
Mm-hmm.
thought to be disseminated, which I think is one of
Mm-hmm.
the most most emerging trends in the impact sector. Once you have solved something or cracked something and it needs to grow in 50,000 cities, hopefully in the next 3 years, how are you going to do that? And sometimes these
Yeah.
models that design it from day one are the ones that can spread easy.
Right. Right. Love your examples, and particularly, I love how you talk about, this idea of not reinventing the wheel, but taking models that exist already and utilizing. Just as you said, it's not the social business landscape is not a separate world. It's the future of where we're going. And probably the COVID crisis is like reality check, right? Like the way we were doing things did not work for nature, so it came back to us.
Yeah.
It put us in the corner.
It's like, sorry guys,
So,
let me take a second so that we can actually get back to normality in environment and then we can maybe release you
yeah.
back. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. By the way, if you guys in the audience have any questions, please type them in the comments. Meg is going to be answering them. I have another question
Okay.
because I know there's a lot of there's a lot of trends that people can tap into when it comes to creating their business, right? As we see it with fintech and with different industries that are trending, perhaps, right, and offer further opportunity. We see also the rise of the impact investment sector now, for example, right? We see a lot of conversation regarding the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So, do you think these or other trends that you can show us are things that entrepreneurs can consider when building a business?
Definitely so. Um, so there is a few layers, even if in some of the ones that you mentioned. For instance, the SDGs being historically, I mean, it's been created as a policy agenda. That's why some of these indicators are not necessarily super straightforward when it
Yeah,
comes to describe our projects. That's
yeah,
why there is very few projects that really can define themselves only with one indicator. Normally, the best projects, especially, touch on many aspects because, of course, they have a systemic effect whatever they get implemented.
yeah,
So SDG being one, because of course, I think it was published right in 2016. We've been 4 years into this agenda now, these sort of very colorful codes that we see now everywhere. But sometimes we tend to forget that that is not just an agenda that we should take as a way to say, hey, we should be doing this. Why are we not doing this? So this sort of sometimes a little bit aggressive moral calling for action. I think that the agenda was meant especially to sort of create a north for exploring opportunity. And then sometimes entrepreneurs fail in understanding that there is power in that. There is a leverage that you can take
mhm,
without necessarily fall into this sort of moral discourse. There is a way to go up within
mhm,
your municipality or a company and say, I know you need to prove that you do something. Let me help you. Let me help you because this is how I implement these indicators. This is how you can show to your audience, to your client base, to your stakeholders that you are doing something in a very effective way that creates tangible progress for SDG number, whatever. I think that some entrepreneurs definitely do it. Some others come more from, but this is so important, why they are not doing it, which I totally share. I'm an activist at heart, so I definitely understand and share that. But then, the best activists are the ones that integrate heart with strategy. And
right.
these SDGs, for example, give a ground for strategy and a strategy of approach that sometimes we're not exploiting as much as we could. The other one, definitely in impact investment, is remembering or exploring the fact that impact investment is just an overarching topic. The
Mhm,
flora and fauna of that forest or that jungle, it's very different with very different priorities, with very different interests, and very different also direction that they might want to take in the future. Regional development, so the impact investment, more if you want traditional, that was about a big infrastructure, is very different from a next gen, so next generation family member of a family office that instead has historically a certain line of investment where now they want to integrate sustainability. It's very different. It's very different the actors or the companies that these, for example, family office might want to invest into, the type of discourse you need to have with them versus an impact investment fund like Oltreventure in Italy, for instance. Of course, you can find in this sort of aquarium the fauna and flora of people that somehow stand for a specific type of economy or a specific type of topics. Never 100%. But yeah, remember that there is many types of actors in this jungle, that you might have conversation with all of them, but that the clarity that we need to have when we enter that room needs to also have somehow, which is another question that I remember you asking me. Like, we tend to forget that social entrepreneurs might today still be seen like the puppies of the economy, like these sort of cute people that want to do business but also doing good. But the level
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
complexities that we need to hold, both for doing what we do and for understanding such a diversity of stakeholders and still wanting to stand for what I believe in, it's definitely underestimated. So another trend that I
Yeah.
would love to mention is definitely mental health. Um, we
Mhm.
we tend to forget how much of a toll it takes on us to be exposed to so much pain that we would love to
Yeah.
alleviate with our own
Yeah.
solutions.
Yeah.
I mean, I can talk for like a long time. Maybe we can do another live just on the trends, but I
Just
think
about that.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to stop 1 minute in something you said that I find very interesting. So when we talk about SDGs, right, we are talking about an agenda of different goals that include, this is for our audience that may not be so plugged into the social world, right? These goals may involve, youth employment or gender equality or pollution. I mean, there's so many different aspects, right? You mentioned how you can add value to this and present it to the municipality, to present it to a public actor. Now,
Yeah.
we know that in Europe, the public sector is very active and it's very involved in these things. What happens and what are you seeing in, the global south, where sometimes it's not so easy for an entrepreneur to present a project to the government or municipality or governorate? Are you seeing this happening? Are you seeing it happening in the Arab world, perhaps in Latin America?
So it's funny that you mentioned this, because for me it's exactly the same. Like, Europe or global south is exactly the same challenges, exactly the same behaviors, exactly the same dynamics. Yes, of course, in the European Union we have created these sort of vehicles for public funding that I find
Yeah,
extremely hard to actually access, in terms of, unless you're extremely on top of this type of grant making, when you're just starting, that is not your reference, because you need so
yeah,
much resources and so much clarity of planning, etc., to access those grants. Which,
yeah,
of course, I'm not saying that they're not valuable, but again, it's grants. So we are back to what we were saying before, right? It's support or injections of money for you to figure out things. So for me, there is also a little bit of a disconnection to what actually is useful for social entrepreneurs and when. But we're gonna get in that course of conversation some other time. uh, for the municipality or for the public sector, I think that what happens between Europe and the global south or Latin America, behaviorally and in terms of challenges, is exactly the same. You have mayors, but also, all the secretaries and all the assessori, the way we call it in Italy, like the technicians, if you want, of a specific cabinet, municipality,
mhm,
region in Europe or national level, that belong to a party. The moment in
yeah,
which you belong to a party, you have an agenda that you have a specific flexibility to really stretch, but not beyond that. Normally, very little, actually. And you have political in like representation, or again, mayors or technicians that are particularly there for a specific type of service to their communities, for which, even if their party doesn't necessarily stand for something, they do, and it was part of their course of service. And others that instead will see more as an opportunity to differentiate from the competition, or to stand out, or to
mhm,
become more popular. So it is a political landscape, and I'm not saying that every single municipality in the world has a sort of um, what was it, the one with the cards, the series, it escapes me, House of Cards type of thing.
yeah. Ah,
But politics is politics, and it's not. equal to anything else. What I do see as a difference, so what I do see as a something to keep in mind is that politics is politics. So to try to avoid to go to any municipality or public sector or anyone really too naively. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen many social entrepreneurs being enthusiastically welcomed by the political force of a municipality, etc. And then the politician was there for, the typical ribbon cutting and the picture,
Yeah.
and then everything else disappeared for good
Yeah.
intention of the social entrepreneur and the sort of tendency we have of believing in others as well.
Yeah.
But this is
Yeah.
not just the political or the public sector; it's with everybody, corporations alike, everybody. It's just people. It's not
Yeah.
about where they sit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the difference that I see between Latin America and Europe is, Latin America or the global south are a little bit less bureaucratical in terms of infrastructure. That there is less legislation. There is less. You should do this, and you only can do it in this way.
Right.
So on one side is better, like to navigate that sector is a little bit less layered. There is a little bit less
Mhm.
people, a little bit less, procedure set. At the same
Yeah.
time, if you need to take into consideration, you would have to create structure you more than expecting structure to come from your, whoever you're speaking, whoever you're
Exactly.
having a conversation with. But municipalities and other things, municipalities or the public sector has normally we as social entrepreneurs we go to social ministry or social department, and we tend to forget, or for example
Yeah.
housing if we do something with architecture, but we tend to forget that one department that is very
Yeah.
interesting for us is the security department, because the security department is the
Uh-huh.
department where you have police, where you have criminality, where you have a lot of these very complex things. And the interesting part about this department is that sometimes poverty or extreme vulnerability of condition ends up in criminality because of lack of alternatives, not because of actually
Yeah.
organized crime. So sometimes there you could
Yeah.
find allies because just as much as you, they would love these families to have more resources so the criminality can be less and the public spending can be less as well because they don't need to be patrolling so much around the neighborhood. This is something that I
Yeah.
definitely think as at least as a model to keep in mind if you want to do anything ever with a public sector.
Right. Right. That's very interesting. Have you noticed startups in the social sector or businesses that are particularly hit by the COVID crisis?
Oof, I wouldn't say that I've seen many that weren't hit by the COVID
Right.
crisis.
Right. Yeah.
Again, we're just a little bit more purpose driven than other maybe smaller medium businesses, but we still are small and medium businesses. The fact that we are smaller boats probably makes it a little bit less hard than other
Mm-hmm.
companies. We need to remember that we have companies of, Boeing, tourism, massive giants that, 2 weeks of not activity for them equals thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of um, dollars, euros, whatever, of debt.
Yeah.
We don't have the type of infrastructure. We don't have the type of tool. We have not invested millions in most of the time in big infrastructure technology. So we need to remember that. On the other side, of course, we're a small business. So in the moment in which one client falls off or one client cannot pay, we're just as game over than anybody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that there is social businesses that have found a way to reinvent already. I always try to remind to everybody that ask me this question that reinvention takes us some stages. Like there is a grieving stage, there is an ending
Yeah.
stage, a selection of what
Yeah.
needs to stop happening, a hard conversation to have if you need to let go of somebody that maybe you have worked, elbow or shoulder to shoulder with, and that it now is, part of the mission, part of the tribe more than an employee.
Yeah. Yeah.
The next stages that we need to take, and by we, I don't even mean just social entrepreneurs in general.
Yeah.
Um, Before being able to see that opportunity, before being able to have freed enough space, with all the pain that that probably will require or challenges at the very least, to then identify what we could do, Of course, for certain businesses, it's maybe partially easier. If you do anything with plastic, you could convert for COVID. I honestly, my doubts that smaller actors actually can compete for the reconversion of bigger companies when it comes to production for COVID. But I honestly have not been on top of this aspect.
Hmm.
But as for everybody else, we're literally all on the same boat. We're
Yeah.
all apart but united, as you know they were saying with their campaign.
Yeah. 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 And one last thing, one last question, because I would like to end on a positive note. If we do find it, do you think there is opportunity in all this situation? Do you think there's opportunity for social entrepreneurs that want to do something?
Oh, 100%, 100%. So I'm definitely
Love it.
again, I'm an activist at heart. When there is a crisis, I'm like, oh great, so we can have the
Mm.
conversation now. That's amazing. And
Right.
again, I don't want to be disrespectful with the pain and the challenges that maybe a lot of people are seeing. Again, I have
Hmm.
family and friends in Italy. So I have a third of my brain here that somehow is always having the phone around because, of course.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not at all actually wanting to play the let's be just happy about this, not at all. But there is opportunity because in every crisis itself means opportunity. Crisis itself
Yeah.
means that something that we expected to go in a certain way showed us how actually, again, reality check, how actually that is going. And an ugly truth, it's still truth. And truth, I think it's one of the highest forms of freedom, because if we are collectively now painfully shedding off veils
Hmm.
that maybe us in the impact sector we were not too much unaware of, maybe compared to others, but
Hmm.
still ourselves sometimes we have our fair doses of naivety and fair
Yeah.
doses of buying into, the same way misogyny runs both way, scarcity runs both way. We sometimes are stuck in a mindset of being the puppies of the economy, this sort of, third sector, not even second
Yeah.
sector, third sector, when instead it's been proven that this social finance can become the most solid way to rebuild a society and rebuild a community. Um, so for me, the opportunity in all this runs on many levels. The first one is definitely sitting down with these ugly truths or these uncomfortable questions that might sound banal, and all of us might have read it on Instagram 1,000 times by now. But
Yeah.
what it means for us social entrepreneurs or impact driven people, I think it has a deeper meaning, because in the moment we ourselves witness that those ugly truths that we were having pretty clear get to the next level and hit the entire system that we were the outlaws of, we still are grieving because that system is going down. We had a participation in that system that is going down. The
Yeah.
grants, the corporate social responsibility, the big companies backed forums and summits that we have joined, that is going down.
Yeah.
Then, I mean, of course, we have heard about it. The new normal is a new normal, and it's not going to be the old normal. And
Yeah.
again, in the impact sector, we might be extremely aware that the old normal had problems, but it does not make us, we don't have an immune system in what that feels like, right?
Yeah.
We still
Yeah.
need to go through that. And
Yeah.
the second reason why I think this is an opportunity is because I have no doubt, no doubt. I don't know when, would love to know when, could take a holiday after that moment. But I don't know when, but this is the new integrative, um, order, if you want, that is going to be established. This where there is not me without the other. There is not
Hmm.
us without the planet.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh my
Yeah.
mind. Oh my God. And especially there is no performance without impact. There is no business today that has not an impact. We just didn't measure it because it was too much of an uncomfortable conversation. People like
Right.
Michael Moore, people like Anand, Giradaras, like the winners, they call type of writers, these activists, these journalists that have tried to raise the flags, that is also the outlaw of the system. So if we are the ones that have started, maybe earlier than others, to try to
Yeah.
integrate these two worlds, there is an expression that says, we might be the voice for the next phase. of this society. And not because we all need to be experts, quite the contrary. If most of businesses will need to scale down on a local level and include discourses and aspects of sustainability, inclusion, gender inclusion, racial inclusion, um, environmental and social impact, then we're the only ones around that have at least a few years of experience. And
Yeah.
even if we are new social entrepreneurs, we have a few years of these conversations, and we have naturalized some
Yeah.
topics that maybe for others are still not quite straightforward to understand. So I would love to invite every single one of us. And again, you don't need to be a social entrepreneur to be impact driven or expert or practitioner. I actually don't consider Impacton a social enterprise at all. We serve social enterprises, but we might be called, consciously or not, explicitly or not, to be the Gandalfs of what comes next. And the Gandalfs is that who, who knows when to talk and when doesn't. Is not a good idea to talk. Who knows how to guide people, who knows how to use wisdom in the right way, who knows how to cast light or shed light on the path when the path is unclear. um, and I do think
Mhm.
that the economic challenges that we have ahead will see this sort of integration, this redefinition of the priorities of capitalism as we know it, or economy as we know it. So those of us that
Yeah.
already are more familiar with all of this and the importance of all of this might well use this time to recharge, acknowledge, forgive the own judgment that we want to be out there helping everybody, and right now we can't, or not all of us at
Mhm.
least. Focus on the practices that we could help spreading, even if it's open source, even if we're all volunteers these days, even if we might not see why, but to really follow that, signal, that sort of invite that we have it, like we wake up in the morning, we know when it's a day that we need to rest, or a day that we need to socialize, or a day that we need inspiration. Now we have the perk of doing that and of choosing ourselves so that we can serve better. That is definitely the number one thing that I would leave this conversation on.
Right. I love the Gandalf metaphor, and I love how we're ending on a positive note.
Do you see
Thank
me
you
with a
so
long
so
beard?
much. Sorry?
Do you see me with a long beard? I mean, I used to have long hair.
No, I can't.
Let's not go down that road.
You're too pretty for that, I think. Thank you so so much, Meg, for joining us and for sharing all your thoughts. I think there's a lot of need right now for social entrepreneurs to also get this kind of ideas brainstorming, because it's very easy to feel trapped, to feel sort of there's no way out. So thank you so much. Thank you again. And as I say every time, happy quarantine. Let's make this into a time of learning, into a time of introspection, sharing experiences. There's a lot of opportunities online that we can use. So let's do that.
Absolutely. I would love to definitely second everything you said. I think that we have the time now to reinvent how do we want to serve these causes as well, trying to remember that we do not need to be the extreme caregiver and forget about yourself, because that is a form of toxicity ourselves, but ourselves and others. That we can reinvent how we want to serve. Maybe the causes that we want to serve don't need us to set up a startup. And I definitely would love to invite anyone who will see this in either reaching out. I'm pretty findable online, Meg Pagani or Impacton. Just reach out to me, reach out to us. We are a small team, but we would be loving to hearing from you. There is a campaign that I want to make sure that I mention to everybody, which is Apart by United. Vale, you live in Italy, so you know that everything started there with this Tanti Ma
Yeah.
Uniti,
Yeah.
which is the translation of Apart by United. Apart by United is right now sharing ready to use practices around coronavirus for either helping the health workers for the quarantine time, that is not just, watch the entire, you know,
Hmm.
what is it, 13 seasons of Friends? I don't know. Like something that is more about connect with yourself, spread the joy and best vibes, how to engage with your family and kids, how to engage in a different way with your roommates. Like really is all about the powerful human practices, and powerful practices for businesses that might want to flip for coronavirus, We have been a little bit on pause this week because we were onboarding a big group of students that are going to help us out with the campaign. But starting next week is going to be at least 3 or 5 per day. And they're all usable, all open source, all in collaboration also with ActionAid. And and as well that, Reinvention is an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
We ourselves, we're going to do webinars, of course, open for anyone who wants to join the journey of Reinvention. So again, doors are open, maybe not the ones of our houses right now, but those are never the ones that are most important. This one and this one are definitely more important.
I love it. I love to end like this. Amr Yusuf is saying thank you so much. Thank you for watching, Amr. And
You.
thank you because we know, this is coming to, I mean, it's already spreading to countries like Egypt, countries like Argentina even. So, practices like yours and platforms like yours. So let's remind everyone, Apart Bar United, right? You can find it on
Yes,
Instagram. Perfect. Perfect. So you can find the practices there, and you can contact Meg with Impacton or as Meg Pagani on Twitter, on Facebook, anywhere. Thank you
much
so
more.
much again. Happy quarantine. Bye bye.
Igualmente, bye.